Hey warriors, listen closely. If I could spend just 10 minutes observing your reactions, watching your facial expressions, listening to your tone, noticing the timing of your responses, I could understand you in ways most people never will. Your micro-reactions, those tiny, almost invisible signals you give off, reveal patterns in your thinking, your priorities, and ultimately, your decisions. And if someone can predict your behavior, they gain influence over you. Control doesn't start with titles, money, or outward authority. Control starts with emotional predictability, the quiet science of understanding how people respond before they even act. Most people equate power with status, wealth, or rank. They chase it, flaunt it, or argue over it. But that's a superficial view. Real power, the kind that shifts outcomes without a single overt move, exists where emotional reaction ends. Look around you. Those who are often pushed, manipulated, or emotionally exploited aren't necessarily weak. On the contrary, they often wear their hearts on their sleeves. They react instantly. They speak before they think. They explain before anyone asks. They make their intentions transparent, sometimes without realizing it. And in doing so, they hand over psychological leverage to anyone observant enough to notice. This isn't about being cruel or manipulative. Machiavellian psychology, at its core, is about clarity, precision, and understanding the mechanics of human behavior. It starts with one uncomfortable truth. Human behavior is driven by advantage. People constantly test boundaries, measure resistance, and observe patterns. The fastest to react often loses control first. The calmest, most measured individual sets the pace, and whoever controls the tempo controls the outcome. When you slow down your reactions, when you respond deliberately rather than instinctively, you render pressure ineffective. Provocation loses its power. Emotional traps fail. That's why the most formidable strategists in history are rarely the loudest. They speak less, they act less. Silence hides intention, calmness masks strength, and emotional control conceals capability. When others cannot read your inner state, they hesitate. When they cannot predict your moves, they cannot find leverage. Mystery in this context isn't an enigmatic personality trait. It's a defensive shield, a tool that protects your influence and autonomy in any interaction. In this video, you will discover how to remove the emotional handles that others exploit, stop rewarding manipulation with reactive behavior, become less predictable without isolating yourself, build a calm, controlled presence that forces others to think twice before attempting to influence or move you. Think of this as psychological armor, behavioral discipline, strategic self-control, skills that make you resistant to pressure, impervious to baiting, and immune to manipulation. Most people never develop these abilities, which is precisely why mastering them makes you stand out. Before we dive deeper, commit to this affirmation in the comments. I control my reactions. This isn't a trivial mantra. It's a declaration that sets the tone for everything that follows. Let's begin with why people keep getting hurt, emotionally and strategically. You are not vulnerable because others are inherently more powerful. You are vulnerable because your emotional signals are visible and readable. When your inner state is exposed, your behavior becomes predictable. Predictable behavior is easily influenced. Once someone understands your patterns, they can steer your decisions without force. Influence begins not with dominance, but with observation. Someone who pays attention to your responses under stress, under praise, or under challenge will always find a way to guide you if your reactions are transparent. Most people reveal themselves too quickly. A minor accusation triggers defense. A slight delay creates anxiety. A simple compliment inspires compliance. These reactions feel natural, automatic, inevitable, but in reality, they are openings. For anyone trained to observe, these openings are leverage. The observer doesn't argue with you. They simply wait for the right trigger. Once triggered, decisions are made emotionally rather than strategically. That's the moment vulnerability sets in, and that's where manipulators thrive. Manipulators are meticulous and patient. They don't strike with blunt force. They probe, measure, and test in small increments. A dismissive tone, a delayed response, or a subtle contradiction. These aren't fights, they are measurements. If you rush to justify, they learn fear. If you resist loudly, they learn ego sensitivity. If you try to please, they understand your desire for approval. Every uncontrolled response you give becomes behavioral data. That data becomes leverage. One of the overlooked weaknesses in human communication is over-explaining. When you explain beyond what is required, you expose both your motives and your insecurity simultaneously. You aim to appear clear, but instead you reveal doubt. Strategic communicators master the art of brevity. They say less than they know, not more than they feel. Concise speech protects position. Excessive speech exposes it. Pressure, when applied correctly, should reduce words, not multiply them.
Each additional word is an invitation to misinterpretation, manipulation, and strategic exploitation. Niccolò Machiavelli once said, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." That quote is deceptively simple, but its meaning runs deeper than most realize. The core lesson here is awareness. True influence rarely announces itself. The most effective influence occurs when the target doesn't even realize a test is happening. Emotional manipulation, subtle triggers, and strategic nudges operate under the radar. They feel like ordinary moments, but in truth, they are evaluations of your inner state. If your emotions respond automatically to every small prompt, you fail without ever realizing you are being tested. Every instinctive reply, every immediate reaction is a potential opening. Speed is a vulnerability. Instant responses feel confident and decisive, but more often than not, they are impulses, reactions that can be provoked at will by someone skilled in reading human behavior. On the other hand, a measured pause transforms the dynamics.
Silence introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty disrupts prediction. When others cannot read your internal shifts, they cannot calibrate their tactics effectively. Emotional discipline does not mean becoming a robot or suppressing feeling. You still experience anger, excitement, frustration, or joy, but you choose when and how that feeling converts into action. That deliberate decision point is where psychological strength lives. When your reactions become intentional rather than automatic, attempts to manipulate, pressure, or push you start missing their mark entirely. Think of each response as a controlled release, a deliberate output shaped by strategy, not reflex. Composure becomes protection. Measured behavior becomes armor. Predictability, unchecked, is a risk. Unpredictability, managed, is a weapon. Drop this affirmation in the comments now. My reactions are chosen. Say it, believe it, let it anchor you. Understanding human nature. The second principle is understanding human nature. Misreading people is costly. When you misread behavior, your actions, timing, and strategies will inevitably fail. Too many people navigate social and professional environments with fantasy models in their heads. They expect fairness, loyalty, and good intentions to guide behavior. Reality is far less idealistic. Advantage, timing, and self-interest dominate. This is not cynicism, it's operational clarity. Observing people as they truly are, rather than as you wish them to be, sharpens judgment and strengthens positioning. Most individuals act according to perceived benefit. Support appears when incentives align. Distance appears when value diminishes. These patterns are predictable, consistent, and ancient. They are not evil, they are structural. The mistake is expecting permanent loyalty from temporary alignment. Expecting constancy without incentive guarantees disappointment. Strategic thinkers prioritize behavior over words. Language is cheap, actions are expensive. Anyone can declare loyalty, respect, or commitment, but very few will demonstrate it when the cost appears. Watch what people do when there is risk, delay, or inconvenience. Observe how priorities shift when resources, security, or status are involved. That is when true hierarchies reveal themselves. Until then, words are performance, action is proof. Observation must replace assumption. Rather than reacting emotionally to what is said, focus on what is repeated. Patterns are far more revealing than isolated moments. A single dramatic gesture can be misleading. Repeated behavior exposes consistency, intention, and true priorities. Professionals in intelligence, negotiation, and behavioral analysis always study baselines, the normal patterns of conduct, before interpreting anomalies. You should do the same. Once you know someone's baseline, deviations become signals rather than surprises. Machiavelli also reminded us, men are quicker to forget the death of their father than the loss of their property. This statement is not about cruelty, it's about priority. Material advantage, resources, and security often outweigh emotional considerations. When possessions, power, or status are at stake, behavior changes almost instantly. Ignoring this reality sets you up for shock, misunderstanding, and misplaced expectations. Detach your ego from observation. Study behavior like a scientist, removing personal offense from the equation. Ask analytical questions. What does this person gain? What are they avoiding? What patterns repeat in their choices? What triggers their cooperation? This stance prevents emotional mislabeling. Strategic observers don't call someone fake, they identify incentive shifts. They don't call someone loyal, they map aligned interests. Emotional victims personalize everything. Strategic observers contextualize everything. And that difference, the ability to see patterns, motives, and incentives without taking them personally, is where real influence and resilience originate. That difference, the shift from personalizing events to contextualizing them, changes everything. When you personalize actions, you invite confusion, hurt, and frustration.
Every perceived slight becomes a storm inside. Context, however, produces clarity, control, and anticipation. Once you adopt a strategic mindset, you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What outcome were they optimizing?" The first question feeds emotion. The second feeds power. The first chains you to reaction. The second frees you to read the situation objectively. Understanding the drivers of human behavior, incentives, fear, opportunity, loss, gain, timing, removes mystery. Behavior becomes readable, analyzable, and predictable without ever becoming personal. This is the foundation of psychological advantage, the ability to anticipate moves before they happen and respond intentionally rather than impulsively. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I read patterns. Number 3. Mastering your reactions. The person who governs their response governs the moment. Situations do not overpower you. Your unmanaged impulse does. Every confrontation, delay, insult, or surprise creates a split second of internal surge, an emotional spike that screams for attention. Most people surrender to that surge. They react instinctively. That is why they lose position, opportunity, and sometimes credibility. Emotional impulses are fast, loud, and seemingly persuasive, but they are rarely precise. Precision belongs to the one who can feel the surge without obeying it, who can pause and select the optimal response. Provocation succeeds only when it produces visible movement. If someone can trigger your irritation on demand, they redirect your focus, hijack your attention, narrow your judgment, and force you to fight the immediate moment instead of advancing toward the desired outcome.
That trade is expensive. Tactical actors, manipulators, negotiators, and field operators exploit this. They provoke to shrink your cognitive window. The smaller your thinking window, the higher your error rate. Reaction control is not suppression, it is command over timing. You still register the event, feel the surge, acknowledge the impulse, but you delay behavioral output. That delay is power. In that brief gap, you choose your posture, tone, words, and direction. Without that gap, you operate like a reactive switch, not a strategist. High-level negotiators, intelligence operatives, and military leaders deliberately train this pause. They know instinctive reactions are rarely optimal. Emotional displays reward the aggressor. Calm, measured responses disrupt manipulation and break the feedback loop on which pressure relies. Without feedback, there is no calibration. Without calibration, there is no control. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does eventually." Applied here, it means disciplined adjustment beats delayed regret. The untrained person reacts first and thinks later. The disciplined strategist thinks first, then acts with precision. Speed without direction is weakness. Measured, purposeful speed is authority. Your goal is not to be the fastest responder, it is to be the most accurate mover. Accuracy trumps immediacy every time. Physiological tools for reaction mastery. One of the simplest and most effective ways to stabilize reactions is breath control. Under stress, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, amplifying emotional charge and impairing judgment. Slowing your breath resets physiological escalation. That reset protects clarity, focus, and decision-making. Elite performers, from tactical units to high-stakes traders, use breath regulation to prevent emotional override. The body can steady the mind can master the body. Together, they form unshakable composure. Another critical tool is language discipline. Words are vectors of control. Short, precise answers maintain structure and prevent escalation. A neutral tone balances perception and authority. Clear, concise wording signals internal order. Long, loud, or rambling sentences reveal internal surge and invite challenge. Structured speech commands space. Disordered speech invites conflict. Mastering language transforms reaction from reactive to deliberate. Cognitive tools for reaction mastery. A third, often overlooked skill is stimulus separation. Not every trigger warrants engagement. Not every remark deserves attention. Some delays are tactical. Some comments are bait, not substance. Strategic thinkers classify stimuli before responding. They conserve energy, prevent unnecessary escalation, and focus only on what matters. Selective engagement is strength. Total engagement is exhaustion. Between stimulus and response exists a decision zone, a mental space most people leave unused. You will not. You will expand this zone, train it, and operate from it. Within this space lies freedom of action, clarity of judgment, and immunity to automatic pressure. Every moment you train this gap, every time you pause to choose instead of react, you reclaim power. You become less readable, less exploitable, and harder to manipulate. Others may still attempt to provoke you, but their methods fail. Your responses become deliberate instruments instead of instinctive reflexes. This is psychological sovereignty, the ability to govern yourself even in the most emotionally charged moments.
That sovereignty changes outcomes. Number 4, becoming unreadable. Predictability is a silent vulnerability. When others can anticipate your moods, your choices, or your next move, they gain invisible handles on your behavior. They can influence your path without a word. Becoming unreadable doesn't mean becoming distant, cold, or strange. It means reducing patterns that outsiders can map and exploit. Strategic opacity is protection. When your internal calculations remain invisible, pressure tactics lose accuracy, persuasion attempts lose direction, and manipulative strategies falter. Most people reveal too much too soon. They speak openly about plans, ambitions, frustrations, timelines, and next steps. They feel productive when sharing their intentions, but this is a trap. Early disclosure invites interference. Opinions arise, resistance forms, quiet sabotage emerges. Not all attacks are overt. Many are indirect, subtle, and hidden. Limiting disclosure reduces these interference channels. Mystery creates caution. When people cannot classify your behavior easily, they slow down, measure their words, and hesitate to act rashly. Familiar patterns invite casual treatment. Unclear patterns command respectful distance. This psychological effect is consistent across high-stakes environments, negotiation rooms, corporate leadership circles, competitive arenas, even elite tactical units. The less emotionally exposed you are, the more carefully others proceed around you. Speech, volume, and frequency shape readability. Constant talking produces behavioral transparency. Controlled, selective communication creates scarcity. Scarcity increases perceived value and reduces interpretive access. You do not need to be silent. You need to be selective. Answer what is necessary. Skip what is intrusive. Redirect what is premature. Conversation is not confession. Dialogue is not a data dump. Machiavelli said, men should either be treated generously or destroyed because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones, they cannot. The lesson here is completeness and caution. Half measures create backlash. Partial exposure invites vulnerability. Share fragments of your plan, and you invite targeted resistance. Share nothing until execution, and resistance arrives too late to matter. Emotional neutrality in public sightings is critical. Extreme excitement, visible disappointment, and sharp irritation produce readable spikes. Spikes create patterns. Patterns enable prediction. Balanced external expression prevents emotional mapping. This does not remove your feelings. It simply removes the broadcast signal. Your inner world remains active. Your outer display remains steady, controlled, and unreadable.
Routine variation is another key unreadability tool. When your timing, sequencing, or workflow is always the same, anticipation becomes easy. Small, deliberate variations break forecast models. Change response timing, change meeting style, adjust communication length, not randomly, strategically. Controlled variation prevents behavioral profiling. Digital behavior matters as well. Oversharing your updates, goals, or struggles online builds a public psychological profile. That profile can be exploited to influence, pressure, or distract you. Strategic operators share outcomes, not processes, results, not preparation, achievement, not intention. This keeps momentum private and evaluation external. Facial control and micro-reactions are equally important. A raised eyebrow, quick frown, or sudden smile can reveal preference, discomfort, or decision-making cues. High-stakes professionals train neutral listening faces for this reason. When your facial expressions do not leak decision signals, your negotiation power and influence rise automatically. Unpredictable behavior does not mean chaotic behavior. It means internally consistent yet externally opaque. You know your direction. Others cannot see your map. Structure inside, opacity outside. This is the balance of unreadability. Number 5, detaching from outcomes. Attachment to a specific result is more dangerous than lack of skill. When you emotionally require one particular outcome, flexibility disappears. And when flexibility disappears, negotiation power evaporates. Those who tie themselves to a single desired result expose themselves to emotional manipulation. They risk overreacting, overcompensating, or making irrational choices to achieve the outcome they crave. Strategic thinkers detach from any single result. They optimize for position, options, and leverage, not emotional satisfaction. Detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means maintaining composure, keeping alternatives open, and avoiding emotional traps that narrow vision. When you detach from outcome, every situation becomes a field of possibilities rather than a test of will. You respond based on strategy, not on the anxiety of personal need. Flexibility breeds power. Rigidity invites exploitation. The moment you insist on one result, you hand leverage to anyone willing to apply pressure. Detachment neutralizes that leverage. Number 6, detachment from pressure and outcome. Pressure has its sharpest impact on those who feel they must succeed at all costs. Secure the deal, win the approval, get the opportunity, or earn the recognition. Need produces tension. Tension produces leverage, and leverage is readable to the observant. Desperation broadcasts itself in subtle ways: hurried agreements, lowered standards, tolerance for suboptimal terms, and blind acceptance of warning signs. A person who cannot walk away is the easiest to influence. Skilled operators know this instinctively.
They watch not only your words, but their willingness to disengage. The less willing you are to step away, the more control they gain over the structure of the interaction. Non-attachment does not mean lack of ambition. It means emotional independence from the immediate result. You pursue goals with vigor, but are not psychologically chained to a single outcome. This creates calm bargaining energy, a presence that alters perception. When you remain steady, whether the answer is yes or no, your perceived strength rises. Stability is magnetic in high-stakes environments because it signals self-sufficiency and confidence. Approval hunger is another subtle attachment trap. When external validation fuels your motivation, influence becomes easy for others. Praise can steer you, inclusion can silence you, recognition can buy your agreement. External approval should be welcomed but never required. The moment your sense of self relies on applause, your direction becomes externally steerable. Machiavelli reminds us, a prince who is not wise himself cannot be wisely advised. The deeper lesson is autonomy of judgment. When your decisions depend on external endorsement, your decision-making center shifts outward. Detachment keeps your judgment internal. Advice becomes input, not command. Opinions become data, not orders. You remain the final authority over your actions. Outcome fixation narrows perception. Tunnel vision limits creativity and reduces situational awareness. Detached pursuit keeps perception wide. You notice alternatives, backup plans, and timing shifts. You recognize when delay is smarter than force, when exit is stronger than insistence. Strategic withdrawal often outperforms emotional persistence. Emotional recovery speed is another critical factor. Individuals attached to a single result collapse under rejection because their identity was invested entirely in that outcome. Detached performers reset quickly because their self-worth is not tied to one moment or one event. Quick recovery preserves momentum. Slow recovery drains it. Resilience is strengthened when identity is separated from outcome. Language is a subtle but powerful indicator of attachment. Listen to phrases like "I must," "I can't lose this," or "this is my only chance." These statements lock the mind into dependency mode, making behavior predictable and pressure easy to apply. Replace them with operational language. This is one path, one option, alternatives exist. Language reshapes internal posture, and posture reshapes external behavior. The strongest negotiator in any room is the one who can genuinely stand up and walk away without emotional collapse. That ability alone changes how offers are structured, how proposals are presented, and how competitors approach you. Detachment is not weakness, it is bargaining gravity. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I can walk away. Repeat it, internalize it, and let it anchor your strategy.
Number 7. Building silent strength. Loud ambition draws attention. Quiet, deliberate progress builds real advantage. Many people sabotage their own rise by announcing every intention before execution. Goals, strategies, next moves, shared prematurely, invite resistance, competition, and obstacles. Visibility without achievement triggers interference. Silent strength works differently. It cultivates capability out of sight and reveals proof only through results. Declaring plans too early triggers predictable reactions in others: comparison, doubt, and disruption. Some will compete with you. Some will question you. Some will subtly discourage you. Often this is not out of malice, but ego, insecurity, or fear. The effect is the same. Your momentum is taxed. Energy that should go into execution gets diverted into explanation and defense. Private preparation protects focus, accelerates progress, and preserves strategic advantage. Underestimation is itself a strategic asset. When others underestimate you, they fail to plan adequately, fail to resist effectively, and fail to anticipate your moves. Silent strength combines capability, patience, and timing. You build skill, accumulate leverage, and strike at the right moment. Results speak louder than announcements. Actions create influence. Words alone create vulnerability. Number 8. Moving in silence. When others perceive you as average, slow, or non-threatening, they lower their guard, and lowered guard creates operational space. This space allows you to build skill, expand your network, and strengthen structures without interference or pressure. Advantage often comes from expectation gaps, the difference between what people anticipate and what you actually achieve. When expectations are low, even modest, measured performance produces shock value. Shock value multiplies influence and impact. Machiavelli observed, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." People trust visible completion more than spoken intent. Words are cheap, action is authority. Silent builders, who develop competence quietly and reveal results strategically, often command more respect than those who announce every plan. Results end debates, announcements start them. Private improvement is also a tool for discipline. When no audience is watching, motivation must come from internal standards rather than external praise. Public performers rely on applause cycles, which are fleeting and inconsistent. Silent performers rely on personal metrics, which are stable and enduring. Stability fosters consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds influence. Low disclosure also reduces psychological pressure. Broadcasting targets create social expectation. Social expectation generates anxiety. Anxiety erodes performance quality. By keeping objectives close, you remove external stress, allowing your execution to be cleaner, sharper, and more powerful.
Speech restraint is a key component of silent strength. Not every step requires narration. Not every accomplishment needs documentation. Strategic operators share selectively and only at the right moment. Timing is critical. Reveal only when the structure is secure, not when it is fragile. Early exposure invites early attacks. Mature exposure invites acknowledgement. There is power in composure combined with results. Those who produce strong outcomes quietly are automatically assigned higher competence. Quiet productivity suggests depth. Loud productivity signals insecurity. Depth attracts trust. Insecurity invites challenge. Energy conservation also matters. Talking about plans releases satisfaction chemicals prematurely, creating a false sense of progress. Silence preserves hunger. Hunger drives completion. Completion builds authority. Build skill where no one applauds. Build systems where no one sees. Build resilience where no one measures. Then reveal only what is finished, functional, and meaningful. This approach creates a reputation anchored in substance rather than sound. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I move in silence. Let it anchor your mindset and guide your action. Number 9. Becoming untouchable. Becoming untouchable is not about becoming emotionless, distant, or harsh. It is about internal stability and strategic awareness. Transformation occurs when your center of control shifts from external pressures to internal command. Before this shift, others' moods, words, and behaviors dictate your state. After the shift, external turbulence may touch your surface, but it does not penetrate your core. You hear everything, but you are no longer moved by everything. At this stage, your presence changes profoundly. You are slower to react, faster to understand, and harder to displace. Insults no longer provoke immediate retaliation. Rejection no longer causes internal collapse. Betrayal no longer sparks blind rage. Instead, every event is processed first as information, second as emotion. This sequence reversal, data before feeling, assessment before action, is the hallmark of psychological maturity. Untouchable individuals do not chase emotional revenge. They prioritize positional advantage over immediate satisfaction. They do not rush to respond. Instead, they reposition, strengthen alternatives, tighten boundaries, and adjust access. Their answers are structural, not theatrical. Drama is loud but weak. Structure is quiet but decisive. Over time, quiet structure always wins. Emotional investment also becomes selective. You stop giving full trust based solely on words. You stop granting unlimited access based on short history. You stop dedicating deep energy to shallow connections. Attention becomes filtered. Allocation becomes intentional. Not everyone earns front row access to your mind or time. Scarcity increases value, including the value of your presence. Calm demeanor becomes your default posture, not a forced act. Others notice. Pressure no longer accelerates you. Urgency does not scramble your thinking. Praise does not inflate you. Fear does not corner you. This consistency builds a reputation of inner solidity, and reputation fundamentally changes how others approach and interact with you. Those around you learn that influence over you is neither fast nor easy. That is the core of untouchable strength, psychological resilience, selective presence, and strategic authority.
Number 10. Becoming untouchable through discipline and guarded presence. Manipulators thrive on reactive targets. They feed on emotion, impulse, and visible anxiety. When you stop being reactive, you immediately stop being an attractive target. The moment you choose response over reflex, control shifts to you. There is also a shift in defensive behavior over time. Early in the journey, self-protection comes from arguing, explaining, and proving yourself. Later, it comes from selection, limitation, and disengagement. Fewer arguments, more filters. Fewer emotional debates, more access control. Exit replaces escalation. Distance replaces conflict. Efficiency replaces noise. Self-respect becomes operational, not merely emotional. You do not just feel worthy, you enforce worth through standards. Late responses to disrespect, immediate correction of boundary crossings, reduced exposure to repeat offenders. Standards are not announced, they are applied consistently. Consistency teaches others how to treat you without negotiation. Your nervous system adapts along with your behavior. Situations that once triggered anxiety now trigger analysis. Situations that once caused hesitation now trigger planning. This is conditioning through discipline. Repeated, controlled behavior rewires automatic responses. Composure becomes natural rather than effortful. Strength becomes the baseline, not a performance. Being untouchable does not mean unreachable. It means unmovable without permission. Influence must pass your filter. Pressure must pass your evaluation. Access must pass your standards. This is the final form of personal power in human dynamics. Chosen response, guarded access, steady presence. You've just been guided through a framework most people will hear, but very few will practice. That is the distinction between entertainment and transformation. Knowledge alone does not make you untouchable. Application does. Discipline does. Repetition does. The principles you've learned, emotional control, behavioral restraint, strategic silence, selective disclosure, and internal stability, are not innate personality traits. They are trained abilities. From this point forward, measure your progress differently. Not by how strongly you feel, but by how well you hold your center under pressure. Not by how fast you respond, but by how precisely you choose your response. Not by how much you reveal, but by how well you protect your inner position.
When your reactions become intentional, your words become measured, and your moves become quiet. People will sense a shift around you. You won't need to announce strength, your composure will signal it. Remember this, being untouchable is not about dominating the room, it is about not being dominated inside your own mind. Noise will always exist, provocation will always exist, opinion will always exist. Your advantage comes from remaining steady while others become emotional. Calm is not passive, calm is leverage. Silence is not weakness, silence is positioning. Detachment is not indifference, detachment is control over emotional dependency. If this mindset is the kind of psychological edge you want to cultivate, stay connected here. This channel is about Machiavellian awareness, human behavior, and strategic power dynamics, the skills that make you harder to influence, harder to manipulate, and harder to break. If this video sharpened your thinking, take a second now, like, share, and subscribe. Sharing this knowledge helps it reach those ready to build stronger mental armor. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. Calm mind, controlled moves. Stay measured, stay aware, stay unreadable. Internalize it, repeat it. Let it guide your presence, your judgment, and your trajectory. This is more than strategy. It is a lifestyle of untouchable discipline.